Portfolio here for your physics class. So we're looking at the Unit 1 Lesson 7 portfolio on phase change. And you have two options for this. You can either do the lab that's presented right in the lesson, or I have an alternative one where you can do it all online. Okay, they're different though, they're completely different portfolios. So for the one that you're doing that's in the lesson, the link here in the lesson is great this time because it actually opens up a Word document, not a PDF. But just to kind of keep things consistent, I did also put this in my website, if I can bring that up here, among the bazillion windows I have open on my screen. There we go. Physics Semester B, changed it up a little bit. If you scroll down, here are the different links. Here's the phase change lab worksheet from the lesson. So when you open that up, there are two parts to this. In part 1, you're going to be looking at the melting point of fresh water, of ice, and then the second container will have ice in it, but it will have salt in it as well. Okay, so for this one, it doesn't really matter what kind of containers you use. I would try to keep them consistent in surface area. You don't want to have a really wide container and a really tall container because surface area matters. So if you use two of the same kinds of containers, whether they're glasses or measuring cups or bowls or something like that, it doesn't really matter for this one because this part you're not heating anything. You do need thermometers, and it's best to have like a thermometer that you use for making candy is a good thermometer. You can also use a thermometer that's meant for the outside. Here, I've got a thermometer here. So see this thermometer right here, you can see it's an alcohol thermometer, and it goes from -30, that's Fahrenheit, so -30 Celsius all the way up to about 110 Celsius. So it goes slightly above the boiling point of water, which is important. You can't just use a thermometer that you would use to take your temperature because those thermometers don't measure hot enough. And they don't generally measure cold enough. Is really the biggest problem with them, is that they're not going to measure cold temperatures because you're not going to have a body temperature of 0 degrees ever. You can't really use a meat thermometer either for the same reason. They don't measure cold enough. So like a candy thermometer works well, or if you have a thermometer that's meant for the outdoors, you can use that. 2 thermometers is preferable. You can do this with one, but then you'd have to do each part separate, and it's going to take you longer to do that. If you don't have thermometers, well, that's why I have an alternative portfolio you can do where you won't have to have any equipment at all. Okay, so we'll do that part second. So if you don't have any of that stuff and you just want the alternative part, just fast forward the video so that you get to that part of the video. So for part 1, you're going to have 2 different containers. In container A, you're going to fill it with ice and then just a little bit of water to surround the ice. And for container B, same thing, fill it with ice and then just a little bit of water surrounding the ice. But in container B, you're going to put some salt in it. And it says about a teaspoon of salt in container B, and stir it up. In fact, you're going to stir both beakers or both containers with a spoon or a stir stick for about 15 seconds, and then start your stopwatch. And you're going to keep your stopwatch running for the entire time. Okay. After about 1 minute, you're going to record the temperature of each one. And then you're going to do the same thing for 2 minutes, and so on and so forth. You're going to stir them periodically as well. You're going to keep doing this until 20 minutes has passed. So every minute you'll measure and you'll stir, and then you'll measure and you'll stir. And you're going to record that data in the first data table. Okay, for the second part, part 2, you're going to do the same thing, but now instead of just melting, you're going to go to that second step, that second phase change of vaporization. So here, don't use the same containers. You want something that you can cook on the stove. So you're going to want to use a pan, probably, like a little saucepan. And if you get 2 little saucepans, that's awesome. That would work best. Again, you're going to want to have to keep them around the same size. So not a big frying pan and a little saucepan, because that's going to add a variable that you don't want. So if you don't have 2 that are the same size, then just do 1 and then do it again. a second time. Again, it takes longer that way, but it's more accurate. So pretty much the same experiment. You're going to fill them both about a third of the way full with ice and then add some water to each one. And then for one of them, you're going to put about 2 teaspoons of salt because you've got a little bit more here. And again, you start stirring and then recording the temperature. Now you're going to do this for about 5 minutes. So for the first 5 minutes, you're going to actually not have any heat added to this at all. You're going to just leave them at room temperature. And then after about 5 minutes, you're going to turn the stove top on and you're going to start to heat it. Turn it to about a medium heat. And again, keep recording the temperature every minute and stirring it every minute. So pretty much the same thing you did before. You're also going to note any phase changes that occur. So if you notice, when does the ice completely melt? So make a notation on the side here at what time in each beaker or each pan does the ice completely go away. So that's completely the point of melting. And at what point is all of the water or do we start to see vaporization occur? So you might start to see I should take that back. You should probably make a note. I would say make a note when the ice completely melts and when it starts to boil, because you're never going to get to the point where you completely boil it away. It would take you quite a while to do that. When you're finished with part 2, then you just have some questions to answer and you have an analysis. You do have to graph the data for part 1 and part 2. And so this can be a line graph and 2 different line graphs, in fact, 2 double line graphs. You can do these by hand or you can do these using an electronic program. On my website, I do have, maybe it's on my homepage. I do have a video on my homepage. It's not on the physics page, telling you how to make a graph on Microsoft Word. So if you don't know how to make a graph on Microsoft Word, there's a little video that shows you how to do that. Otherwise, you can do them by hand, but you should really get used to trying to do these in an electronic format because that's something if you take a science class in college, you're going to have to be able to do. Okay, so that's the first portfolio. Again, you need to have some thermometers and stuff for that. For the second portfolio, you're going to be using an alternative, using one of the PhET simulators. So this is a clickable link. You can open this up. This is going to take you to PhET Interactive Simulations, and you're going to go to the, if I remember correctly, it says go to select states. So it's going to really just walk you through every single step you need to do here. So follow all the directions very, very carefully. And the data gets recorded in this data table here, and then there are 3 questions to answer. Okay. So slightly different portfolio. When you click on here, you're going to get a picture where you can see, the different molecules, and you can kind of see the temperature, and you can control the heat by sliding this bucket on the bottom. And you can drop this down and change it to Celsius degrees, so it's a little bit easier for us to kind of understand. You can pause this here and kind of really look at the arrangement of the molecules and play it again. You can change the different type of molecule you're looking at here. You can decide whether or not you're making it a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Okay. Notice the temperature changes automatically when you do that. Okay. So just kind of reset everything using the symbol. So again, this one is pretty straightforward. It doesn't really require me to explain too much. You're just going to follow the directions that are given on this sheet, step by step, until you get to exactly what you need to do. And in fact, I even do an example for you here for neon. Okay. Just a few symbols. Remember, abbreviations. MP is melting point, BP is boiling point. So that's your alternative portfolio. You can do either one of those two portfolios. Whichever one you choose to do is completely up to you. And then just submit it in the Dropbox. And that's what you got to do for this one. So if you have any questions or concerns, as always, you can send me a webmail message through Connexus. Otherwise, good luck, everybody, and have a fabulous day.